Okay, we're dividing decimals. How can you place the decimal point in a quotient? So hopefully we'll see if what you predicted yesterday or you estimated yesterday or you came up with the pattern. 5.6 is just how you do that. We're going to tell how to really move the decimal. 6 divided by 3 equals 2. 60 divided by 30 equals 2. It doesn't matter if you times it times 10. Every time it still has the same quotient. When you do the dividend by 30, even if you divide it by a decimal or multiply it times part of the whole and go the opposite way, 12 divided by 3 equals 4. 1.2 or 1 and 2/10 divided by 3/10 equals 4. So we're timesing each side by that hundredth or whatever place it's in, and we get our answer. So if Matthew has 72 cents and he wants to buy stickers that cost 8 cents each, how many stickers can he buy? So what do we have to multiply both of the dividend and the divisor by the power of 10 that makes it a whole number? So we're trying to make this a whole number. So if we take that times 100, because it's in the hundreds place, it will be 72. If we take this times 100, as long as we do what we do to one part, we have to do the other part. If we take that times 100, because it's in the 100 spot, it's an 8. So they were both in the 100 spot, so we divide them both by 100. And now we just think of it as a whole number. 72 divided by 8 equals 9. So what did I do to make them a whole number? I divided both sides by whatever it took to make it a whole number. So I divided this by 100, or times this by 100 to get 72, and I took this times 100 because they're both in the hundreds place to get 8 whole. So if we look at it down here, and it says here, so if I times this by the power of 10, I move my decimal one place and it will get to be a bigger number, and it is a 7 whole because my 10 told my decimal to move it here. If I take this by 10, it's going to be 5.6 because I only moved my decimal to the right once. So my decimal only moved once. So notice I could move this decimal how many spots? 1 spot. That meant I had to move this decimal 1 spot, and I get it out here, and 57, and I get 8. So do you see how I moved this decimal where it was here, and I had to do the same thing to the one on my dividend. So if I have a decimal in the divisor, I have to get rid of it. How did we get rid of it when we were multiplying? We moved it out. How many spots did I have to move this one out? 1 spot. So I made a whole number. Well, I have to do the same thing here. Well, my decimal was right here, so I had to move it out 1 spot. So now I have a whole number. So it's all a matter of moving that decimal, and hopefully we'll practice a few more of these and it will really come together and make sense for you. So if we look at this, Sherry hikes the Pacific Coast Trail. She plans to hike 3 7/2 of a mile. If she hikes the average speed of 1 2/10 miles per hour, how long will it take her to hike? So what I'm really doing is I'm dividing 3 7/2 divided by 1 200. So we got to think of this as a compatible number when we estimate. So I think about, well, 1 can go into 3. I'm going to say 3 miles, or 3 is my decimate, 3 whole, because 3 divided by 1 equals 3. I think of these as whole numbers. All right, so let's look. We changed this to the power of 10 because I'm going to take them both by the same amount. So by 10, the power of 10, so that I move my decimal 1 place, so I have 12. I move this and I have to move it the same amount. I'm going to move it 1 place and I get 337 2/10. That's what I got here, so that's really what I'm dividing. Okay, but I want to show you here, it was 1 2/10 divided by 3 72/100. And then we just talked about, because I'm taking it times 10, I'm getting rid of this decimal. It takes me one shot to move it out. It takes me one shot to move this one, because what I did to this one, I have to do to the divisor. What I do to the divisor, I have to do to the dividend. Now I have a decimal right here. We're going back to what we already know. When I have a decimal in the dividend, I just move it straight up, because I no longer have one in my divisor. I got rid of it. So now I just think about this as dividing it. And I look at it and I say, well, 12 can go into 37. I know my 12s, and I know it can go into 37 3 times, and I get 36. Drop down, and my decimal is gone. 12 times what gets me to 12? 1. And I have 12, and I have 0. So what's my answer? 3 1/10. And that is very close to 3 wholes. So I hope we're starting to understand about moving the decimal and why we're moving it, because what we do to one side, we have to do the other. How are we moving it? We're really taking it times the power of 10. So 1400ths divided, 1 9600ths divided by 1400ths. We're really taking the 1400ths times what? We're taking it times, I'm going to take it times 100, because it's 100. So I'm going to take it times 100. If I take it times 100, that means I'm going to move my decimal 2 places, and I get 14. So now I'm dividing. So what does that look like? 14 divided by, if I look here, I moved it 2 places, or I took it times 100. That means I've got to take this one times 100. I got to move it 2. My decimal goes here. I'm going to put it right up here. So we're going to divide and check our answer. So we're going to start checking our answers. And how do we check division? By the inverse operation of multiplication. So 14 divided by, or times what gets me to 19? 1. And I get 14. I have 56. 14 times 4, because 14 times 4, 16, it's 56. So 14 times 14, so now when we check our answer guide, so we really got the answer of 14, right? So let's check our answer, and we have 14, but what did we start with? What was our dividend? Our divisor? It was really 1400, so we got to put that back, times 14, because that was our quotient, 16, 5, 0, 4, 1. If I add this together, and 2 to move my decimal out, 2 to move my decimal in, we are using everything we know about multiplying and dividing decimals. So it was 1 9600ths. What was our dividend? 1 9600ths. Works every time. All right, so we're going to complete these problems. Is what I want you to do is complete these 3. Follow the steps of what it says so that you get used to dividing them. Do this. I want you to start dividing and check your answer. We know how to do that. We can do that. So I want you to do this row here. On your own, I would like you just to do number 8. All right, and then if we have time, we'll come back. Evens, 1 or 2, and all. If you are starting to understand this, division of decimals will be so much easier now that you understand what you're really doing. You're taking this times the power of 10. You're taking by a power of 10. You're taking this by a power of 10, and you're getting your answer. Go to work.